In this video, I want to show you the key features you should look out for whenever you want to buy a camera for your church or your ministry. Shalom to you, my friends. My name is Isaac from Trego Studios. On this channel, we train media volunteers to become well equipped as they serve God through the media. So if this sounds like you, I want you to consider subscribing. So like I said in this video, I want to show you the key things you must consider before you buy a camera for your church or ministry. Now, I know you're really anxious to get a camera, but make sure you watch this video to the end before you buy it, because if you buy it eventually and later you come to realize that, oh, this thing is not really useful for what you want to achieve it from, then it's like a waste of money. That money in your hand is God's resources, so pay attention and listen to this video before you buy your camera. Alright, the first thing I want to talk about is the resolution of the camera. In this age, camera is getting more advanced, and even very cheap cameras can shoot HD quality videos. Alright, but now you can even think beyond HD. You can start thinking of 4K cameras, you can start thinking of 8K cameras. Now, what is the difference in the resolution of a 4K camera and that of a 2K camera or just ordinary HD camera? What they call resolution is the amount of information that is stored in a frame of image. Pixels makes up a frame. When you're looking at an image is a combination of dots. Those dots are called pixels. Now, the difference is in the quality of information that is retained on the frame of those cameras. Now, you cannot compare the information that will be retained in a 4K camera with that of an ordinary HD camera. A 4K camera will definitely, retain more information. How is this an advantage to you? Now, take for instance, your video is being viewed on a larger screen. The resolution of your video will become obvious on larger screens. So when you have a lower resolution, the way your video is going to display on a large screen is not going to be as sharp or as bright as a camera that is 4K or 8K. Now, imagine playing your video in a screen that is as large as those theater screens, and you just recorded a small HD video. It will be as if the camera is not sharp. Now, that's the difference in resolution. So when you want to buy a camera, think of it, what platform will people be watching my video? If your target is just mobile users or laptop users, maybe you should be fine with just any HD camera. But when you're thinking of big screens, like people will be watching your videos on plasma TV, larger TVs, LED TVs like that, then you should consider having a 4K camera. It's going to be really helpful. Even if you're not exporting your videos in 4K, having a 4K camera still has a way of enriching your video, no matter the resolution that you eventually export it. It has a way of enhancing the quality of that video when you scale it down from a 4K rather than just recording exactly that resolution that you want to post. So resolution is the first thing on my list that you should consider before buying a camera. The second thing you should consider is image stabilization. Now, what is image stabilization? Image stabilization is the ability of a camera to stabilize your image when the movement is not smooth or when the handling is a bit rough. So there are some cameras that are built in with image stabilization, such that even though you do not have tools like stabilizer, when you don't have tools like gimbal or a Steadicam and you are just using handheld, you're just handling the camera with your hands without any support gear. If your camera has image stabilization, it won't be so obvious that you're actually using your hand, because there is a way the camera will compensate for the shakiness in your hands and make the image a bit steady. Alright, so consider image stabilization, especially if you know that this camera you'll be holding it mostly and it's not going to be standing on a tripod stand or whatever, especially cameras that you use for taking reaction shots or for taking instrumentals while the band is singing. So you should consider image stabilizations. Now, the reason you should also consider this is so that your work in post-production will be reduced, because if the image is not stabilized, then you have to use an image stabilization process in post-production to make the image a bit stable. If not, your video is going to look amateurish and disturb you into the eye when people watch it. So consider image stabilization whenever you want to buy a camera. The third element you should consider is interchangeable lens. Now, you want to buy a camera that you can easily change the lens so that you can use lenses as it applies to your individual situation, different situation. So sometimes you might want to shoot close, and all you just need is a small focal lens. You just change it to that particular lens. And sometimes you're so far away that you need to capture a moment, get it as wide as possible or as close as possible from that far distance. Then you also need to change the camera to a camera that has a zoom lens that can cover that distance, So consider interchangeable lens, because some cameras do not actually have ability to change the lens, so you are just limited to the capacity of the lens. That is, if the camera lens is between 55 to 135, that is what you will be limited to. You can't go beyond, you can't go lesser than that. So but having an interchangeable lens will not box you to a spot. So if you get an interchangeable lens with a camera and you outgrow that lens, or you need another one to be able to change, you can easily just change it, buy a new one, just change it, rather than buying entirely a new camera. So that is why you should consider interchangeable lens. So that gives you room to expand, to change, and be unique and creative with your choices. So another thing you should consider when you're buying a camera is the low light capability. Now, what is low light capability? Low light capability is the ability of your camera to be able to shoot in low light condition. So sometimes you are in an environment, or your church, a space where you do not have enough light to lit the environment or to lit your subjects that is supposed to be on frame, So instead of getting more light, that would be the solution. If your camera cannot shoot in low light condition, you have to get more light, or else you want to crank up your ISO and you get a noisy image and all those things. But if you have a low light, a camera that can shoot in low light capability, then even when the room is not so bright, that camera will be able to capture details and not introduce noise. Either ways, it is always an advantage to have a camera with low light. Even if you have sufficient light in the stage or the auditorium where you're using, it is still better to get a camera with low light capability. It's an advantage, alright? So consider a camera with low light capability next time you want to buy a camera. Another thing you should consider before buying a camera is the portability and the ergonomics, alright? So there are cameras that are big, there are some that are small. So you should ask yourself, which one are you comfortable with? Are you comfortable with the design of small cameras, which is usually the case with DSLR cameras, or you want big professional cameras, video cameras that you can even carry on your shoulder and be going on about? Now the thing is, even the DSLRs, if you are not comfortable with their small size, you can decide to rig them, and then they become one giant stuff that you can carry all about, easily. So you have to consider ergonomics. But of course, you have to convert a DSLR cameras to a heavy camera that you can hold and handle anyhow. That comes with additional expenses to rig it up, right? So consider your cost and consider the ergonomics, the portability before you buy it. And also the design of the camera. Is it something that you can easily get and operate? Hope the interface is not complex, and the design, you want to buy something that media volunteers can easily understand, and such that even when you are not there, if you are the media lead and you are not there, other people can also operate it without being confused. All right, so that's one thing to also consider. There's no point buying the best camera when your stars or your media volunteers cannot operate it. There's no point buying a trendy camera when your media stars cannot operate it. So what are you bragging for? This is God's work. All you care about is functionality, quality and functionality. So if the camera is good, also consider, is it also portable, and is the ergonomics, is it good for my team? So that's one thing you should also consider when you're buying a camera. Another thing you should consider when you're buying a camera is the video output. So there are some cameras that give you SDI video outputs, there are some that give you HDI video outputs, there are some that give you S video outputs, there are some that just give an SD output, SD video outputs. Some even combine some of these things together, all right, especially with professional cameras. So you should consider what kind of outputs do you need. For instance, if you want to be live streaming, you need something that at least has a video output of either an HDMI output and SDI output. Now SDI outputs are more stable than HDMI output. When I say stable, I mean you can, once you plug an SDI cable, it can easily hold firmly on the camera rather than HDMI. You know, I mean, I've had issues several with HDMI cameras. You know, they tend to break at that edge, and then you will tend to have issues with the with cable. Many times you have to replace cables because they are not firmly locked, and sometimes even if you are not replacing cables, you notice that you find out that the signal is getting disconnected from the computer where you're streaming down to the camera, and you'll have to be fixing, or because the fixing is not usually locked most times. So that is something you must consider. And you want to be live streaming a good quality video. You don't want to buy a camera that will output an SD video output for you. I mean, that is to a poor quality in this age and dispensation. You should buy a camera that can give you a good output, video output. Another thing you should also consider, especially for those of you who will be live streaming with your camera, is to ask or to check if the camera has a clean HDMI output. Ensure it has a clean HDMI output. And a clean HDMI output is that once the HDMI is connected to the camera, such that it will, when you are live streaming, it will not be displaying the ISO, the information that is displayed on the the monitor or the viewfinder of the camera. It can actually get rid of that for the output. So ensure that the camera you are buying has a clean HDMI output, or a clean SD output, or a clean video output. So that's another thing you should consider when buying a camera. So you can go and buy a good camera, and then by the time you plug it, you notice that how can you get rid of this information, and they tell you there's no way to get rid of it. Sometimes if you want to get rid of it, that means you also get rid of it on your viewfinder, and there are some important information that the camera operator needs to be seen on that, on those displays. Now, even if you're able to remove all of the information displayed on the screen, but that will be at the expense of your camera operator, who is supposed to need some of those information on screen. So rather than going through that stress, why not get a camera that has a clean HDMI output, and that's going to be really helpful. Another thing you should consider when buying a camera is the battery capacity. Check the battery capacity of the camera. If you know that in your church or your ministry you are going to be streaming for long hours, you are going to be recording for long hours, 3 services at a stretch, that might be running up to 5 hours plus, and you do not even have enough camera to say you want to, replace zombie. So you should consider the battery life of the camera you're buying. So you do not want to buy a camera that the battery will be going off easily all of the time. Every 30 minutes the battery is already off and you have to change. That every time you have to change your battery, you are disconnecting your audience, you are disconnecting your online audience from the visuals, so you are depriving them of that ability. The only thing that can be a means of escape is if you have a second camera that can be used at that instance. But what if it suddenly goes off? The battery suddenly goes up, because there are certain times that your camera will go to a point that it will notify you before it goes off. Alright, so you have to consider the battery life of the camera. And even if the battery life is good, still ensure that you buy a spare battery, or you buy spare batteries for your camera, or you can consider dummy batteries that you have to plug, but then your power source must be stable so that it will not suddenly go off and then you lose your data while recording. Another thing you can consider before buying your camera is the audio input. Sometimes you want to record clean audio straight into the camera as you're recording the visuals. So consider the kind of camera you are buying. So there are some cameras that can take in XLR inputs, that can take in jack inputs. Some can only take mini jack inputs, especially these DSLRs. Most of them can only take mini jack inputs, or 3.5mm jack inputs. So make sure you consider your resources. So make sure you consider that before buying a camera. So if you know that the output you want to get is an XLR output, then you need a camera that can accept XLR inputs as audio. So that will also reduce the stress of having to sync videos together, when you record audio separate and visuals separate. Alright, so consider that before buying your camera. The last point I want you to consider when buying a camera is ND filter. They are built into certain cameras. So what ND filter does is, when you are, for instance, you are shooting in the bright sun outside, when the sun is really bright, and even though you have turned your ISO to the lowest, closed your aperture to the minimum, yet your frame is still bright, what you use at those times is ND filters. So if you can get a camera that has inbuilt ND filters, that's going to save your day in days like that when you are in an environment that is excessively bright. If your camera do not have inbuilt ND filters, then you might be forced to buy external ND filters as accessories for your camera. Why go through that stress if you can actually buy a camera that has inbuilt ND filters? Especially if that is going to be your major problem, then you should consider that. So, but if you are going to be in a condition that the light is going to be controlled, that you can decide the amount of brightness, then that might not be a major thing to consider. Alright, so that wraps it up for this video. I hope you have learned one thing or the other. So each of these things that I told you to consider, you don't necessarily have to tick all of these boxes to get a camera. You just have to know which one is peculiar to your individual situation, and adjust accordingly. So if you know that you want to be live streaming with your camera, you know what you have to consider in those lists. If you still don't know by now what you have to consider when you want to live stream with your camera, you should watch this video over and over again. Alright, so if you know that the kind of audience you're going to be targeting are those who are going to be viewing on larger screens, that you have to consider your resolution. Your resolution matters for your camera. Alright, so either way, having all of these things checked is an advantage, it's not a disadvantage, but some might not be so important, because getting a camera that has all of these things might mean higher cost. So you also have to consider your budget. So when your budget is in the way, then you have to make sacrifices of which one is actually important to you. So which of these parameters do you really, or is really of a concern to you before you get your camera. So I believe you've learned one thing or the other in this video. So if you also have contributions to this video on what we should check before buying a camera, you can add to the list in the comment section below. Till I come your way next time, I want you to remain faithful in the Lord's service. God bless you. Bye.